Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the final day of week 2 of Devtoberfest, Best Practices Week. And, we're finishing this week on an absolute bomb of a session. To my left or to my right, depending on how this thing works, is the absolutely wonderful, inimitable, I can say that because I've had a coffee, James Governor. So first of all, welcome, James.
Hello. I hope I don't bomb, but we'll see. We may go off.
I was trying to be trendy with bombing in a good sense, but that's probably failed as well. We've both got our, we were just discussing how to describe these things. We've both got our sort of pastoral backgrounds, and there are clouds in both of them. So I guess that's appropriate. So we're going to be talking today for half an hour on cloud native and specifically best practices in the cloud native era. But before we start, I want to say a little bit about James, and then I'll hand over to James to introduce himself a little bit more. James has been around the SAP community for a long time. He's part of the furniture in the best possible way. And James is one of the founders of Redmonk, the industry analyst firm. He co-founded Redmonk in 2002 with Stephen O'Grady.
We don't talk about dates anymore. A
long time ago. Yes, a long time.
Somewhere in a galaxy.
That's a good way of starting. Actually, a long time ago, and their focus is developers as real key influences in tech. Developers are the new kingmakers. That's a phrase that you may have heard, and that was popularized and boosted by James and co. So, James, do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and Redmonk, and also about your T-shirt?
I mean, I think that's a pretty good description. There are plenty of analyst and research firms that understand the world of enterprise tech purchasing. Sometimes a little bit backward looking. We try and understand practitioners and engineers, the decisions they're making, what's happening in tech culture, and therefore it's a slightly more forward-looking view. But basically, we just see our base. We see ourselves. We're an industry analyst firm, but we're also developer advocates. We want, enterprises, startups, SaaS companies, and everyone else to do a better job thinking about the needs of the practitioner. And really, that's how we try and understand the world, and that's our position. We do run some intimate events. My business partner runs one called the Monktoberfest. Obviously, folks in the SAP ecosystem know something about things that end, Oktoberfest. But Monktoberfest is as monks. It's craft beer and a conference about tech culture again.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it was cancelled again this year. We were going to try and run it. Mine is called Monkey Gras. But we like to get together and have very nice beer experiences, quite frankly, and that's what the shirt represents.
Yes, I've been very lucky to have been able to attend one of those, and it was still one of my favorite conferences. And I'm not just saying that. So this is, like I say, a super appropriate conversational topic: cloud native and best practices. Because in fact, I'm just going to post the URL to Devtoberfest's home, and you can look. This is week 2. Week 3 is all about cloud native. So I think we should start maybe by musing on what cloud native really means. Because I was in an IRC channel this morning, as one does, and somebody was saying, what really is cloud native? And I found a definition from the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And I'm going to read this out so we're all on the same page. And maybe we'll start from there. Is that okay?
I think that's the best place to start.
Best place to start. So it says, and I quote, cloud native technologies empower organizations to build and run scalable applications in modern, dynamic environments such as public, private, and hybrid clouds, containers, service meshes, microservices, immutable infrastructure, that's a good one, and declarative APIs, that's an even better one, exemplify this approach. These techniques enable loosely coupled systems that are resilient, manageable, and observable. Combined with robust automation, they allow engineers to make high-impact changes frequently and predictively with minimal toil. So that's that is a pretty rounded definition that gets all sorts of different pointers to different things. It's amazing. It's like
fully buzzword compliant.
Fully buzzword compliant. I love the word toil at the end. It's such an old-fashioned word. I did look it up actually this morning. It's from the Latin for a machine that crushes olives. So I don't know. I couldn't work that in somehow. But anyway, I thought I'd say that. So this definition, tunicula, I think is the word. Yeah. Anyway, this definition, does this resonate with you, James, in your experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think sort of the reason it does resonate is that, quite frankly, this stuff is bloody hard and there's a lot to do. And, you know, within that definition, there are a whole set of disciplines that we need to embark on if we're going to sort of get more advantage out of our systems. I mean, you know, it's kind of, if we look at a definition from the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, you know, they've got a particular view, which is please adopt Kubernetes, right?
Yes.
So a lot of their definition is underpins, you know, that. And, you know, once you start saying, use service mesh, and then you're cloud native, and it's kind of like, you know, I'm not really sure that needs to be in a definition, but it's useful, as I say, in that it points to the fact there's a lot to it.
Yes.
That said, it is almost too much. You know, you sort of, you know, hear all those words, and it does just.
It's like an avalanche, right?
It sounds great, but it's an avalanche of words. What do I do now? And I think perhaps that's a problem. And for the CNCF, they have such a clear agenda. They are in effect a technology vendor.
Yes.
You know, saying this is a stack you should use. And I think the conversation about platforms, tools, people, it never boils down to just adopt these technologies. That said, we do need platforms in order to underpin cultural changes as well. So it's, as ever, it's complicated. It's not a bad definition, but I just always, I'm a bit wary about it must be containers, because
interesting.
You know, if any cloud native definition that says Amazon Web Services was not originally cloud native is clearly broken, because if we want to be, you know, if we want to understand cloud native approaches, where better to look than AWS, which heralded so many of them. And, you know, there it is, the culture. It's culture of product, small teams. They talk about the 2 pizza teams, very strong product ownership. They don't go off on massive projects. It's all about, you know, building a thing with an owner of that thing. And I think that ownership, that shift to a product mindset, to me, is part of being cloud native.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what I immediately think of when you say that is the idea that, yes, I in fact, I've never thought about this before until you said this, but containers is only an answer to the question, how do we do microservices? How do we have these sort of robust, immutable things? Well, right now, containers is the answer. It might be something else, you know, in the future. But I guess also, is it fair to say that the idea of containers, you know, because that's what we've got right now, that also fits in to the philosophy and the people-oriented side of things, because it enables this small product, did you say 2 pizza team, this small product team to build, or teams of teams to build independent meshes of interconnected microservices, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, that's a big part of what we're actually trying to do. We're not here to adopt Kubernetes.
No.
I mean, you know, I look around and you know, I see organizations and I see what I think are mistake patterns, anti-patterns. You know, and I sort of jokingly say there's a new role in IT, which is the chief Kubernetes officer. And you say, you know, what's your job? It's to, you know, build out a Kubernetes platform and manage that. You go, well, why are you doing that? Oh, because it will make us more flexible. And again, there's some of that, I think, in that definition we started with. You know, the job is not to build a new infrastructure. The job is to become more effective. And you know, it's very interesting. You talk about the implementation specifics. I mean, I remember having a conversation. I was lucky enough to meet Werner Vogels,
Oh, right, yeah.
the CTO at AWS, a few years back. And I said, Werner, I said, so like virtualization, is it possible to imagine an AWS, if we think about all of the things that you are, could we have this without virtualization? And at the time he said, no, absolutely not. We couldn't have done any of the things that we did without VMs and virtualization as an approach. I'm going to have to re-ask him the question, because I sort of feel like there are certainly parts of the infrastructure now which are much more container-based. We do change the underlying technology platforms, but the approaches that we've taken and what we've learned and so on are super important. For me at least, if I take a step back and go, okay, Kubernetes is all of this complicated stuff. You certainly look at if you ever go and check out the CNCF.
The picture, that huge
the
picture.
Yeah, it's just incredibly complicated. Go back to like why people got excited about Docker. You mentioned immutability. It was just this idea that I could have the experience of using Docker mapped really well to CI/CD and throwing stuff away rather than patching stacks. It was like, this is the stack that I'm standing up. This is the thing that I'm now going to throw away. I'm going through an iterative process of software development. And that kicked off a bunch of changes. So to me, foundational, as I like to say, everything good in modern software development starts with CI/CD. It doesn't actually start with containers, but that journey can sort of lead us to cloud native approaches.
Exactly. Funny you mentioned Docker. One of the other things that Docker opened my eyes to is this whole idea of a declarative approach to, I want to define what I want, not how to get it, right? And which is also part, I think, of the philosophy, the approach of cloud native, rather than any tool set. It's more of a mindset rather than, mindset, not tool set. You heard it first here. Mindset, not tool. Anyway, but just going back to what you were saying about the conversation with Werner Vogels, about, could you do this? Could you have done this without virtualization? And you go back and ask them the question again. I think maybe, it occurred to me when you said that maybe virtualization was the bootstrap, an enabler to get to the next level, which we've, to get to the sort of the CI/CD based, everything is a microservice, everything is sort of in a mesh. But I'm seeing the phrase bare metal more and more now, not less and less. So I think the cloud native and the best practices are not at all related to, like you say, the tools, but it's more about, what are we trying to do? And what's our approach? What are we trying to achieve here in terms of the development architecture, right?
They are, look, I think it's important to say that the tooling does matter. Like, of course, culture and process change, absent of tools, doesn't really make any sense. We're talking about SAP here. If we think about the wave, the ERP build out, where people were doing business process re-engineering, they were, it was here are a set of processes. This is how you constitute a business. Here is a platform that can support that. And that did actually enable a sort of a culture change for a lot of enterprises, for SAP's customers. The tool choices do matter. I just think that one of the ways I think about this is like sort of one of the things we've learned over the past sort of 18 to 20 months, where, when we got people like, we got this politician the other day said, oh, workers should get off their Peloton and get back to the office. And for me, it's like, well, hang on a minute. Are we working for the office? Shouldn't the office be working for us? And I think that sometimes with technology platforms, it's the same thing. We end up like, hang on a minute. Are we working for the infrastructure?
Or are we the tail or are we the dog?
Yeah, exactly. Are we? Are we the
Dogtoberfest? There we go.
To be fair, we're both out in fields, so there might be dogs about. But yeah, so I really do think that's platforms matter, but what's really important is knowing why you're taking the journey. Because I've definitely seen, I've seen people, we're going to do cloud native. We've got the chief Kubernetes officer. And we're doing all the things we said we weren't going to do anymore, right? Now we're doing cloud where, where we're going to, we don't have to build massive capacity. We'll start small and then go big. We're going to do smaller products,
smaller products and quicker deployments, pieces. More often deployments. Yeah.
And then you meet people and they're like, yeah, we're going end-to-end Kubernetes, and we're going to build. We're spending $50 to $100 million on this project. And you just kind of step back and you go, well, yeah, but why? What are you actually doing?
It's funny because it's almost like the difference between, you know, a monolithic delivery and, you know, a micro delivery. And the whole point, I think, for me about the cloud native mindset is that things are broken down into their very, you know, fundamental component parts. So you can and should, but you can start small. You don't have to go $100 million big bang, because it's not. The whole point is it's not, you know, a single deployment thing.
I mean, we know of at least. I mean, I'm not gonna name them, but an asset management company, one of the, you know, 2-3 biggest in the world, trillions of dollars under management, and they said, oh, we're gonna rebuild our trading platform on Kubernetes. So we can be cloud native, so we can, you know, be more,
take that checkbox.
We can be more productive and resilient and stuff like that. And, you know, they sort of, okay, we're gonna DIY it, you know. And this was even, you know, pretty much before we had as many choices of platforms out there from vendors. Oh, we're gonna do 100%, you know, sort of. We don't need a distribution from a vendor. And they start building saying, well, we need people. We're massive. We've got all of this money. So they went out and they hired loads of the most amazing engineers. They, you know, hiring from, you know, competing with startups. So they're running around. And I, you know, when I say start, I mean the competing with Silicon Valley, very well funded. No, think about they're you know, $350,000 salaries, you know, getting the best people. And they did not have a single person on the team they'd hired from startups that had any banking experience and or any compliance experience. And when one person raised their hand and said, so Kubernetes can be the security defaults are not great. You can quite easily get into root access to everything in quite a scary way. They were told, don't worry about it, just build faster, we'll worry about security later. And to me, this is like all of the things that we ever do wrong in IT, and worrying about security later is definitely not cloud native. So you know, and this is not a made up example. This actually happened. So there's plenty of room for sort of disasters. And on a smaller scale, I mean, we've seen you know, Red Hat came out of the gate. Look, originally OpenShift was a PaaS, some success with that. They sort of they quicker than anyone else realized, okay, Kubernetes is the thing we're going to build on. Sold OpenShift, but there are customers out there that bought it and still don't know how to use it. Red Hat's big necessity now is to actually help transform how some of their customers build software, because literally we've got empty clusters. You know, people are like, we're not ready to build microservices. We don't really know what we're doing. And then they want to blame Red Hat that they bought this thing. And it's like, well, have a reason, you know, have a reason for buying this technology. Understand what are the processes that it's underpinning. What's the mindset that it's underpinning.
So you're saying that this particular example, and maybe other companies as well, they've gone gung ho and built the infrastructure ready to run, you know, a cloud native style sort of set of services applications, but they're still missing the mindset and the mentality and the ability to actually build stuff in that way that will run on that platform, right?
That's absolutely right. And you know, sometimes these are, and these can be because of technical reasons. These can be because of human resources reasons, do we have the people that actually know how to work in this new style? Sometimes you do. You take an organization like Target. Target used to have they had 30% were internal in terms of IT development, and 70% contractors. And they realized that this wasn't going to work for you. Like, if you're competing with Amazon, it's probably best to not have 70% of your people being just contractors that, day rate, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Over the course of 3 or 4 years, they literally take to 80-20, where 80% of the people were internal and 20% were contractors. They built a dojo so that they could learn new ways of working. So you've got a retailer with a dojo learning about test-driven development, CI/CD, hiring people with open source skills. That was the thing they said was core. We need people that understand open source. That cloud native definition doesn't actually say open source. And in a sense, maybe it doesn't need to be. I mean, Amazon, as I've said, is cloud native. They're not all about open source. But certainly most organizations that are going to be successful in using these technologies, they embrace, they use, quite likely contribute to open source. And they certainly, to your point about mindset, have an open source mindset. So hiring those people with a modern development, open source mindset, enable them to make the change. Look, if we look at SAP, we can't tomorrow say, oh, we now live in a world of continuous deployment. That's not how, that's certainly not how ABAP works, right? It's just, there are physical limitations, architectural limitations to your ability to make those sorts of changes. So yeah, sometimes it's people changes that are holding us back. Sometimes it's architectural changes. So I guess what I'm saying is that the know what you're doing and why, hire accordingly, but yeah, have a plan. If there is a best practice, and I know that sounds obvious, but too often it is architecture for its own sake, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing in IT, and it gets us into trouble. I mean, I mentioned some of the banks buying a platform. I mentioned the asset management company. The other thing we've seen repeatedly, and this isn't necessarily just cloud native, but just technology in general, open source mindset is great, but that doesn't mean build it all yourself.
No.
So we quite often see what ends up happening is you're serving the office rather than it serving you. You've built, I don't know, some monitoring infrastructure built on Elastic Stack. You end up with a team of 4 or 8 people who are managing that as opposed to building any new functionality. And again, I think that cloud native should be about a modern approach where you're understanding the new technology, but you're being measured about its use. And it definitely doesn't mean DIY all the time. Yeah,
you're being measured about by its around its use, not around its implementation. And there's a very subtle but important difference there. Actually, just going back to, you mentioned different companies and everything, and you talked about the people in the companies and the dojo, for example, which is it's a lovely idea. In your experience talking to companies, have you seen how best practices go from a pattern that seems to work to being maybe even sort of codified and implemented on a wider scale at companies? How does that generally work in your experience?
It doesn't.
Okay, good answer.
We're living in a world where 15 to 20% of the org might be living in the future and doing all of this stuff.
Yeah,
it is really difficult to get beyond that. And sometimes stuff that looks like cargo culting, might be useful. There are teach everyone how to improve their test coverage and to shift some of that testing left. You're gonna get better results. Like, that may seem like, oh wait, no, there is a correlation.
Absolutely.
Organizations that do a lot of testing can move faster with more resilience. I mean, if you go back to that, your cloud native
definition,
the definition, what we're trying to do is build more with more resilience. That happens if you do more testing. So there are some things that are absolutely the right things to do, and that you can begin to get more people in the org doing it. But look, what do we have? Some people dig their heels in, they don't want to change. You've got some sort of options there. Some people are already living in the future. Others can be persuaded. But yeah, no, I don't think there is and if we look at Pivotal, Pivotal Way, again, very dojo oriented, go in, breakfast at 9:07, I think they had. Everyone in the company has it. So, their customers would come and see that culture. Cloud native, to do cloud native, you have to have exposed concrete walls, right? So, they had this sort of package of things that you could do. And certainly there were some organizations that became more effective, but it's always hard. How do you, and everyone's got Red Hat Open Innovation Labs now. IBM called it the Digital Garage, or in the UK, maybe we call it a digital garage. But it's, if we're quite often talking about organizations with 10, 15, 20,000 software developers, and you're talking about, well, they just aren't, how do we retrain? And so then you try and instill a culture of, so that they're doing more learning, maybe going to more events, stuff like that. We used to be like, do your job, don't get out and about. If you want to be cloud native, you better, and obviously we can't go to events because, well, we haven't been, here we are, we're not in person.
Yeah, exactly.
But give people the time to do stuff like this.
Yes.
Give them a budget for events, give them an education budget. Give
them time to think and focus.
Give them some space to do this. We've seen take an organization, and I'm they're not the be all and end all of this sort of transformation, but even an organization like HSBC, right? Their tech leaders are all about like, okay, let's try and understand. It is about a social change. So it's about what tools are interesting to you. So they go out and they do surveys. What tools do their developers want to adopt? Then you ask about codification. They have a process whereby they're asking, we've got this. What are you using? The standard should be. Oh, you're liking this. Tell us more about that. And then if other people are like, yeah, we want to use Docker too, we want to use containers, then I heard this from one of their senior IT leaders. Maybe he was just, blowing smoke, but at least they're saying the right things.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's survey people. Let's send out a newsletter based on what we found. And that sounds sort of trivial, but just the fact that you are asking your developer, and that's a great book. Jeff Lawson, founder of Twilio, Ask Your Developer is a book he wrote about how we're going to get better business outcomes, getting developers closer to the business. That's a big part of sort of cloud native. But yeah, that's the codification. If it's done from the top down, it's likely going to fail. You need to get buy-in from more developers. And in terms of scaling that, we're still really, really challenged, DJ. There are very few orgs that it's called legacy for a reason. Someone has to keep the lights on.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost sounds as though, when you gave the answer about, actually maybe only 20% really get it and everything, it sounds like we may even end up with, a new cloud native version of Conway's law, the law that says, an organization designs systems that reflect their structure, right? In the same sort of way, companies are still evolving and companies are still trying to figure out how to do this. But I think what you've just said, which may be the perfect thing to end on, is it actually needs to be approached. The cloud native mindset needs to be approached from both ends. Developers need to embrace and learn, because this is all about new stuff and we're still figuring it out all together. But also the organization as a whole, from the management top down level, need to be receptive to, this works for us, this doesn't work for us, we've tried this, we want to use this. And it's like a joint venture.
I love the Conway's Law point. I think your CI/CD, Conway's Law, these are the things that will enable us to get where we want to go. And it is a joint venture. This is one of the big things for me in looking at the industry over the next couple of years. We've just gone through a period of and we're still going through, actually, in lots of ways, so much fragmentation. You know, how many keynotes have you seen? Oh, it's a golden era for developers, right? So many tools and platforms we can choose, which is great. You know, we can open source, Lambda functions, new cloud platforms, Versal, Render. I've got all of this wealth of them. Oh, I've got new JavaScript frameworks. Oh, this is amazing. So much choice, so much choice. Oh, I've got Kubernetes, I've got Go, I've got Rust, I've got so much choice. It's so great, so great. But you end up like there are cognitive overheads to that. There are technical debt implications to that. And the one for me over the next couple of years is that let's understand what are the golden pathways. You ask about how we can all become more effective, so that we can have some guardrails, so that the organization can set the standards that can be instantiated in a platform, so that we can all begin to become more effective through this culture change. And I think that's the place that I want to see investment, is really understanding we need a developer experience and an operator experience where we can define platforms that make us more productive. And I think that we're beginning to get there. And certainly from my perspective as a researcher, that's some of the stuff I find really interesting. I mean, looking at, not everyone's Spotify, don't get me wrong. No. They have a really interesting approach to, they built their own platform. It's called Backstage. That's where every developer in the company, and you know, data scientists as well, when they get up in the morning and they go in, that's what they see. That's the place where they're gonna, you know, kick off pipelines, you know, fine tuning, everything else. That's where they are. That's and
it's the default
approach, which is very much, how do we have a golden path so the developer feels productive, but there are some constraints there. And I mean, I think as Europeans, hopefully we've got, maybe that's something that appeals to us, the idea of constraints, rather than this nonsense of freedom, which is just do whatever you want.
Constraints are good.
Constraints are good. So the next couple of years will be about these new cloud native platforms with more constraints. You know, things like, as I said, crappy there. I got one swearing. I could do a bigger one, but crappy security defaults in Kubernetes. Let's fix that so that the other, you know, so that banks, telcos, everyone else can feel more confident.
Yes.
How do we lock things down? What should things look like? There are things that we should bake into the platform. A bit less freedom, actually, in some senses, freedom can make us more productive. So driving those constraints, I think, is where cloud native needs to go, and that's where best practices are going to emerge.
Amazing. So one of the things that makes me always super happy and super sad at the same time when I'm talking to you, James, is that this could go on forever. The conversations with you are always super enlightening and fun, but we're out of time already. So what happened? What happened to that last half hour? James, is there anything? I mean, that sounded like a brilliant way to end. But is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was enjoying the conversation so much. I didn't even check Twitter.
No, me neither. In fact, I can see the chat scrolling through
people, you know, I don't know whether, you know, Thomas Young is throwing rotten fruit at me, or
no. I mean, Tom's doing a great job. I can see the live chat in the YouTube studio here, but it's like going past too fast for me to check, because you know, talking to you is the most important thing. But Tom, I think, has been having a conversation with lots of people. There's been lots of chats, so thank you everybody in the chat as well for joining and listening to James and to me this morning. This wraps it up for DevToberfest Week 2 best practices. One thing you've got to do, and I'm going to put it on there right now, is oops, I can't even type. I'm getting so excited. There, go and check out redmonk.com. Is that some really cool insights into all sorts of things that James has been talking about, and James's colleague as well. I'm not just saying this. I get a lot of good thoughts, food for thought in my brain from reading this stuff. So please go and check that out. James, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everybody for joining. Cloud Native Week next week. And yeah, that's it. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. That's bye from me.
Thanks. Great to see everyone. And yeah, enjoy the rest of DevToberfest. Did I pronounce that right? Devtoberfest. Should be able to do it. Monktoberfest, Oktoberfest, Devtoberfest.
Yeah, come on, James, for goodness sake. Right, anyway, I'm going to end the stream now.
Okay.
Bye, folks.
Bye.